All right, welcome everyone to episode 9, Optimizing Logistics with Blockchain Technology. This is the Web3 webinar by INX Technologies. And about us, we are a technology company with a design-first approach. We help forward-looking startups and enterprise firms with Web3 solutions, fintech solutions, and health tech solutions. A little bit about myself. I'm a technology researcher and a Web3 specialist. I've been in this space for about 8 years. And I also have a interest in emerging technologies. And you can contact me with the links below. So my email is there. You can go to inxtech.com. That's our website. You can message me on Telegram or LinkedIn and Twitter as well. All right, we'll get right into it. So today I'm going to talk about these three pain points primarily, and we'll get into more detail with each slide. So firstly, the world trade settlement will be revolutionized with blockchain technology. So that means world trade settlement means all the logistics goods that are all the supply chain and logistics related items that are in transit across the world. They are settled currently through paperwork and through tedious processes, and I think this will be revolutionized by blockchain technology. So that's point number one. Secondly, blockchain technology is already finding application in real-world supply chain management. We'll talk about a couple of big examples of what people are doing. And lastly, companies across various industries are exploring blockchain tech and its potential to make supply chains more efficient and trackable. So supply chain and the global trade. Global ocean freight accounts for 90% of goods traded globally, and it's highly dependent on paperwork that has not been securely digitized. So it's still there's still a lot of paperwork that goes back and forth, bills of lading, lines of credit, stuff like that. Some of the stuff is like it's still paperwork, which is then photographed in some cases or scanned in some cases. But in most cases, there's still a lot of actual physical paperwork that's involved. Shipping information usually travels through numerous companies and contractors, so there's no one shared ledger between all of them. Any one process or any one the slowest link in the chain determines the speed of the process. And a late approval or lost form can leave goods stuck at a checkpoint or port for extended periods of time, and that causes the delay. Also causes a lot of loss in terms of expenses because goods take up space, and that means it's expensive not to have your paperwork done. In case you're taking up space at a port or a checkpoint, then you end up paying for it. Supply chains, especially international supply chains, are extremely complex. A large company supply chain at the moment looks like an entangled web more than a streamlined linear process. I know mentally when we think of it, we think of a streamlined linear process like goods get from point A to point B, but it's often a lot more complicated than that simplistic version of thinking. And while globalization has allowed for more efficient cross-border movements of goods and services, in many cases it's also lengthened supply chains and added a lot of complexity to them. And we can't really go back to simpler versions that existed earlier because they're not efficient. So complex supply chains often are more efficient. Dealing with a large number of domestic and international entities and strenuous documentation procedures necessarily creates friction in logistics. So a lot of friction is caused by the complexity and the intricate nature of these shipments. That being said, we still can't go back to simpler logistic systems where it goes from point A to point B because it ends up being too expensive. So these systems, compared to simpler ones, are more efficient. They are more complex, but at the same time, they're more efficient and they're cheaper in the larger scheme of things. International payments take a couple of days to process. I'm just talking about regular international payments. We're not even going to get into the logistic stuff for a second. So international payments, if you send a wire from one country to another, it often takes a couple of days. And sometimes it gets frozen and then paused, and banks ask questions back and forth, and then it's released over time. So international payments can take a couple of days. When we talk about the logistics framework and supply chains across the world, it's multimodal. There's not one mode of transport. There's several modes of transport. So it could be on a truck, it could be on a ship. Your items could be on a barge for up to one point, then they could be transferred to a truck and then to a ship. Rail cars can often be involved in the process as well. And this is what makes it kind of difficult to track. Going back to shorter supply chains, as I mentioned earlier, is prohibitively expensive. Companies are therefore turning to different solutions, including blockchain technology. to keep track of numerous entities moving at the same time. The reason for this is it stores and quickly exchanges documentation, which is trusted because it's an immutable and tamper-proof ledger, and to track transportation vessels and to instantly settle payments. So using smart contracts and cryptocurrencies or tokenized versions of dollar accounts, instant payments can be settled. And a large and complex documentation can be stored on blockchains as well, which can be audited in real time. So there's like security, auditing, and everything built into these solutions from the beginning. The blockchain solution, where information is recorded in blockchain ledgers, is immutable, and therefore it can be acted upon. So if we know that is the single source of truth, that let's say a container has crossed a certain port, so we know that's true, and it's been verified by, let's say, multiple oracles or multiple parties, and then that those confirmations exist in the blockchain ledger. Now we know that 3 different parties have confirmed that this specific container has crossed this international checkpoint, which means the insurance providers could change. A lot of the paperwork could change hands, and all of this could be done in digital, like in digital format over blockchain technology, over blockchain ledgers. This also means certain contracts can be settled, and certain new contracts can be opened immediately once it crosses an international border. The simplest example is just thinking of an insurer. This could also include logistics providers. So maybe one logistics provider has a their mandate is to kind of get a shipment up to a certain point and then hand it off to someone else. So if we know that it's crossed an international border, maybe that switch has happened then, and that one contract can be closed and the previous one can be entered, and all dues and stuff can be settled as well at that point. So blockchains can help promote more transparency, since the documentation is all there for parties who have permission in permissioned blockchains, for example, to see. I will talk about permissioned versus non-permissioned, i.e. private versus private versus public blockchains later, in a few slides later. And as I mentioned earlier, changes in possession and ownership of goods as they move from their producer to the point of retail could be entered into the ledger instantaneously and permanently. Smart contracts can be written, which are based on these trigger events. Trigger events meaning, we could assign a bunch of trigger events. One trigger event could be the crossing of an international border. One trigger event could be the handing of the shipment from one service provider to another, so on and so forth. So the benefits that blockchain technology provides in this case is supply chain professionals can use it to gather and use tracking data in dynamic new ways. For example, there's many examples. For brevity, I kept it to one example here. Entries in a blockchain database could trigger other tasks, such as the assignment of the next batch of goods arriving at a port, to a certain dock, or to a container area. So let's say a shipment has crossed into a certain area. Then a signal could be generated, and it could say that the goods have crossed this area, which means they will be at a certain dock or a container area within the next 30 minutes to 3 hours or whatever. And that could kind of have them start preparing that area to receive those goods. And the reason, this already happens with certain softwares, but the reason this is important is because you could have documented evidence that a message was sent at a certain time. In case the area is not prepared, someone can go back and assign whose fault it was, and it's all there on the ledger for everyone to see. Applying blockchain technology to instant settlement of transactions can also reduce friction in commercial financing. This underlies global trade, and it's currently an area from which many trade disputes arise. So just settlements and responsibilities can be assigned there, so arbitration can happen much faster as well. And additionally, dispute resolution could be agreed upon beforehand and applied instantly on the blockchain when necessary. Instantly meaning the ledger can figure out, or the logic programmed onto a blockchain ledger can figure out, if X, Y, and Z happens, this person is to blame. If X, Y, and Z doesn't happen, then that person is to blame, or whatever. Something like that could be agreed upon previously, and rather than go through a long process of arbitration with human beings involved, it could all happen programmatically and instantly on a blockchain ledger. Smart contracts are, I think we've done a few episodes about smart contracts, and we've talked about them in great depth, but I'll repeat it for the sake of this episode. Smart contracts are self-executing contracts that can be triggered by an external real-world event, and the details of which are provided by a trusted oracle. So the oracle could be a sensor, it could be an API call from somewhere else. So it could be either of those. And once a transaction is logged, smart contracts can instantly release payments held in escrow to a counterparty. They could also do a bunch of other things. They could create new smart contracts. They could send trigger events to other contracts, or they could start timers elsewhere. They could inform people or certain parties of something. So there's a bunch of things that you can program smart contracts to do. And since contracts are smart time-stamped entries, digital payments can greatly reduce the time and cost associated with intermediary processing, including so you have a timestamp that something happened at this point, and now we have a timer that goes off that says the payment needs to be released within X amount of time, as long as certain conditions are met, or something of that sort. So it just makes the process a lot faster and more efficient. And I think it reduces the complexity of it because it stores it in such a in a tamper-proof ledger. So it's like the one source of truth for everyone to see, and multiple parties could be on this ledger. So different logistics provider, different finance providers, banks, insurers, everyone could be the counterparties. Everyone could be on the same ledger for the sake of simplicity. And I'll get into that in a couple of slides as well. Transactions on the blockchain can be settled instantly, and smart contracts have the potential to automate transactions across entire supply chains. So the point of origin to the point of delivery. A smart contract could release a certain quantity of funds upon the receipt and verification of a document showing that a shipment of goods has changed hands, which we have gone through a couple of slides ago. So getting on the same page, this is what I was talking about earlier, where I was saying that to fully realize the benefit of speed, transparency, security, and accessibility of data, all the parties involved should be on the same platform. And if not the same platform, they should at least be on an interoperable platform. So platforms that can talk to each other, so that we're kind of sitting on a ledger that can it's kind of the same. Or if it's not the same, it actually has the ability to talk to other ledgers and work on a common mission together. Various efforts are underway to achieve blockchain interoperability. There's a bunch of really good platforms out there. So I believe interoperability has been achieved in some form, but I think it would be even more efficient for the sake of certain parties that this all happen on one ledger. And this could probably be a private ledger rather than a public ledger, because I don't think everyone would appreciate all the information being out there. There are certain aspects of it that can be made public for everyone to see, but I think for trade secrets and kind of like relationships, business relationships, strategic business relationships, a lot of this stuff would probably be private. That being said, all the private people involved would still have access to the ledger with different permissions of what they could add in there and what they could look at. So in conclusion, the application of blockchain technology to supply chain management, including logistics, could reduce errors, delays, fraud, improve inventory management, and identify and resolve issues faster. This will be of benefit for everyone involved. So this would be good for the sellers, the intermediaries, as well as the consumers. Sellers will be able to better track costs and capacity, better estimate delivery times for multiple routes, and make more intelligent decisions based on the data. And then transport providers will be able to post details about available capacity and routes, as well as reduce transport times and costs. And lastly, consumers will know where their products come from and will benefit from reduced costs and shipping times. This obviously includes the data that you make public to consumers. The consumer doesn't have to, or might not even be interested in knowing that the shipment that they have purchased has crossed 6 different ports and gone from here to there 7 times. They might just want to know the percentage of the journey that's over. So it might be a different metrics that a consumer might be interested in. So we're not all looking at the same data. We're not all concerned with the same data. We're concerned with the data in some form, but not necessarily the same points. So what might be of interest to a trucker or a shipper might not be of interest to a consumer. Lastly, how we can help. We can help you optimize logistics with a blockchain tech solution by a few following things. We can do blockchain and logistics advisory services. We can help you choose a platform that's interoperable. We can help create the checks and measures that your project requires, which means create the right set of smart contracts and map all those relationships. We can help integrate on-chain and off-chain oracles to your smart contracts. So this includes oracles, which might be sensors. It might be multiple sensors in some cases. So This could also be like checkpoints. It could be various forms of sensors that we incorporate and human inputs that we incorporate into the system. Um, we can do comprehensive relationship mapping and documentation of all your smart contracts, and audit and test your code. We could also help provide design and support for your project. We have a great in-house design team, and which means all the front end stuff and kind of like the user experience. And we can help you create and launch your tokens for your project if you are doing that. If you're not, that's fine as well. And we can help you launch your project on a live platform. Whether it's a private one, we could help you deploy that privately as well. All right, I'll open it up to questions. In the meantime, please feel free to add me or follow me in any of these on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Telegram. And if you want to reach out, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Telegram as well as email me on shaan.ray@inxtech.com. And you can check out our website for more details and contact us through the website as well, in case you have any custom builds that you're looking to do. All right, so we have a couple of questions. Firstly, how does the lack of trust or coordination between industry players in the logistics space play out in the successful implementation of blockchain? So this is a great question. I think because the lack of trust is something that the blockchain can really help with, because blockchains essentially are trustless environments, meaning you don't have to trust someone to transact with them. All the rules are defined on the platform. The rules of interaction are defined on the platform. So you can interact with someone and you can actually transact with someone without necessarily trusting them. So the lack of trust and coordination between industry players in the logistics space, it helps with the successful implementation of blockchain technology because this adds a layer of trust. You have all of the actions in a given environment that are recorded in an immutable ledger and timestamped. So you have a chronological record of everything that happened, where it happened, how it happened. You have all the details. As long as you set up your logistics supply chain properly, all the details are on there. So in the event of arbitration, anyone can go back. The system, in most cases, will just go back and see who's right or wrong, or who needs to be compensated. And otherwise, if you actually take it to a court of law, the international court of law for like logistics, then you can look at the set of rules that you've agreed upon when you entered the contracts, the smart contracts, and the different relationships, and it can be pretty instantly audited by whoever's looking. So I think it's a great opportunity. I know one of the examples I did want to mention was that IBM and Maersk are working. Maersk is one of the biggest logistics companies in the world, and IBM, of course, is IBM, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, enterprise tech. So they are working on a partnership for creating a blockchain ledger to help their international shipments. And I think it's such a big project that like whatever they do will have implications for the rest of the projects out there and the rest of the players out there. So that's something to watch out for sure. And that's something to watch out for. But like people have been looking, I guess this project's been going on for a while. So it's just kind of like a wait and watch approach with that specific project. The next question is, what are the challenges involved in blockchain implementation for logistics? I think blockchain implementation for logistics is fairly simple. Logistics system at the moment are they're pretty complex, but they've been mapped out by various users and by various software companies and logistics companies. I think all that needs to change is just the database layer. So you just swap out a regular database layer with a blockchain database layer, and that's about it. And you'd also have to map like which relationships you'd want to put in there and which smart contracts you'd have to get into place. Apart from that, most of the input points are already there, and you'd have to think about how you're going to digitize some of the paperwork that goes into the processes. Right now, they still use paperwork because that is the trusted source. It's a trusted piece of paper. It's been stamped by someone. It's been, like someone's put their seal on it and it's trusted. But once you start trusting your database, you can kind of take that paper layer and put it into a digital format. So I think it's a fairly simple process to move the regular supply chain processes to a blockchain-based supply chain process. Any more questions, guys? We have another one. How do we make a choice? How do we make the choice between private and public blockchain for supply chains? I think that's a great question. Again, in most cases, public blockchains are for everyone to see. and private blockchains are private, limited to the users that are given access to them. So I think in most logistics system, it would probably be some form of a public blockchain, private blockchain. I apologize. And I think the public blockchains would be more for like if you want to do, if you want to have a use case that allows someone to track their shipment or something of that sort. But in most cases, it would be for enterprise use cases. I think they would mostly be private, and the private ones would have access to whoever's involved. So let's say all the shipment people would be in there. The banks would be in there, the insurers would be in there. Maybe some form of regulatory access could be given as well, just so that they could do their checks and measures. So I personally think it's mostly going to be private blockchains for this. The public ones maybe for could have different use cases, but I don't think they have use cases immediately associated with supply chain systems that are blockchain based. All right, I think that's all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much. Please message me on either of these links, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns or anything else. And I look forward to talking with you next week at the same time with the next episode of the Web3 webinar. All right, thank you so much.